We are now live. Good afternoon, ladies. Or is it evening? I'm not sure.
Evening.
Yeah, okay. No, that's something I have become more conscious of being here in Mexico because you have to give, like you don't want to say buenos dias when it's really buenas tardes time and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So we are holding on just a second to see if our other guests will join us before we start. And somebody just asked for the link, and I'm struggling to figure out how do I find the link. Okay, maybe if I tag her in the post, we'll do that. Okay, I did that. I'm trying to be super technical here. Okay. So today we are going to talk about long-term solo travel. So not just I went somewhere for a weekend, I went somewhere for 2 weeks. We're talking about months, even years. Um, We have Kirill Guthrie here, who I met because she was so gracious as to let me interview her for my podcast. And how long did you travel? Because I don't want to get it wrong.
Yeah. I backpacked around the world for 18 months.
18 months, so a year and a half. And where'd you go?
I went to 15 different countries. I started off in Southeastern Asia and then flew down to Oceania and then over to Africa and then back home.
Okay, 15 countries, year and a half. We are hoping that Patricia Clay can join us because she is like a super duper long-term traveler. Yeah, long-term traveler. She is actually still traveling, or she would be if it wasn't for COVID. Okay. Try this. Okay. So I don't see another message from Patricia, but if Patricia is seeing this, try and jump in. Okay, hold on. I was going to say try and jump in where you can, but it looks like hmm. She said it's still not working. I don't know.
Can she use her phone instead of the iPad?
I'm trying to look at this picture she sent. Y'all, eye products are not my there's not my jam. I use a PC and an Android phone. So when you tell me there are iPad or Apple product issues, I'm at a loss. Okay, let me see. What does this say? You can use blah, 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 blah. You can use StreamYard on your iPhone. For iOS, only Safari will work. iOS only has video for version 12.2 plus. I have no idea what that means. Oh, okay. I don't know because I wanted Patricia to be able to join. Maybe try from your phone. Hello, hello. Okay, y'all, give me another second to see if we can get Patricia in here. If you've got questions about the topic of long-term travel while I'm trying to sort out this technical issue, go ahead and drop those in, and we will make sure that we answer them. But again, the person who knows nothing about iPads and things of that nature, am trying to give somebody advice, and that
It's not going well.
No, it is not going well at all.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, y'all. I'm sorry, Pat. I don't know why it's not working. Oh, because it says to give your camera and all of that access. How do I use? Well, I don't know, y'all. Okay, let me see. Okay. Hey, Alicia. Okay. Okay, so here we are. Okay, so we're talking about long-term travel. If you've just popped in, this is Karel Guthrie, who I met because she was a guest on the podcast, my podcast, Picky Girl Travels. I did a whole series on Black women who were living abroad. And Karel currently lives in Sri Lanka.
Yep.
But she is not in Sri Lanka right now, but she will be returning there shortly. And so we said she took an 18-month trip to 15 different countries.
Yep.
In Asia and Africa.
And Oceania. So
and
New Zealand and some islands.
All right. So why did you decide to travel to 15 countries in 18 months?
It was essentially a gap year for me. I was working in construction and came into a bit of money, like we discussed on the podcast. I was on a motorcycle, had a motorcycle accident. So my insurance paid out $100,000. And so I got to keep $67,000. And so I figured, why not quit my job and backpack around the world?
Okay. Now, when was the intention to backpack for 18 months? Like when you were putting this together, was that your plan? Like, oh, I'll be gone for a year and a half?
No, I didn't really have very many plans. I just kept going until the money ran out. And then I booked a flight home on credit.
Okay. So can you talk a little bit about how you planned this trip? Because you had this money, you knew you were just going to ride it out. How did you plan the trip?
I had a few specific dates that I needed to hit. For instance, I pre-booked a volunteer vacation in Thailand. So I knew that, let's pretend I started on January 1st. So I knew that by March 1st, I needed to be in blah, 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 Thailand. And so I got a one-way ticket from DC to Singapore and then just traveled overland at my own pace through Southeast Asia until I ended up at March 1st at that date so I could do my volunteer vacation.
Okay. And like, how much planning did you do, or did you just kind of wing it?
I am pretty spontaneous, so I definitely just winged it. The only things that I had when I left the US were 2 volunteer vacations back to back in Thailand. And I also had a work holiday visa, which is a 12-month visa in New Zealand. So the only thing that I knew was that I was going to Asia, and then eventually I would get to New Zealand.
Hi.
Hey, yay.
You know,
okay.
I had to copy and paste it into Safari.
Okay.
The link you sent. So anyway.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're here. Karel was just telling us that she traveled for about 18 months to Oceania, Asia, and Africa. This is Pat Clay, who I met when she was celebrating her birthday here in Mexico City a few years ago, before she went off on her long-term travel trip. I was going to say, where did you go and how much time did you travel?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. So in a span of 2 years, I did 31 countries. So I think the first stint was 16 months. So I started in South America, then I jumped around Europe, and then I jumped around Africa before coming home for maybe 2 or 3 months. And then I left out again to finish up Africa. And let's see, I came back to the US, did Jamaica, hung out around the US, bounced around the US, and then I went back to South Africa. And then the pandemic happened. So I sat in South Africa for like 11 months. And now I'm in Georgia at my cousin's house.
So technically you're still on your trip.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I live out of a backpack, so I bounce around the world, and when I come back to the U.S., I bounce around whoever wants to let me stay at their house.
And when you were initially planning this, was there a time limit on how long you would be traveling?
Yeah, first I thought, okay, I'm gonna do this for a year, and then I started during the planning process. I started looking at things like, no, I need longer. So I thought maybe 2 years. And once I started traveling, it's like, yeah, I'm not going back to work. I'm just gonna bounce around and do whatever I want and be free. So that's what I do.
And I imagine Kirill probably would have still been traveling had the money not run out.
And see, the advantage I have is I do have a government pension. I'm retired military, so I live off a small amount of money and a lot of help from friends and family. So yeah.
Okay. We were just talking about the planning process. You want to talk a little bit, Pat, about how you planned this trip for a year?
Okay, so I was already doing the solo travel thing, and while I was doing the trek to Machu Picchu, there were some people, some young Europeans in my group, right? They told me they quit their job to travel the world for 6 years, and I was like, what? People do that? Back to the U.S. and the thought never left my mind. So I started doing like a search on Google for around the world travel. And I found these bloggers, and they're like, yeah, you can do it for like 25,000 a year. And I was like, I can save that. I can save 20 with my job, and yeah, I can do that. So I gave myself a year to save. I saved for a year. I sold everything I owned. I moved in with a friend. And for that year, I just planned. I mean, I had a low stress job. I had a great job. I didn't leave anything stressful. I just wanted to travel freely. So I would sit at work when I didn't have anything to do and just stare at a map and just plan it out and do the research. And yeah.
So did you have, like Kirill had, she had booked a volunteer vacation. She had a
work holiday
visa in New Zealand. So she kind of planned a couple of things, and then from there just kind of wung it.
Filled in the gaps.
Is that the past tense of wing? You wung it?
Winged it, I think.
Hey, we can make up a new word.
So like so Kirill was not a super duper planner. Uh-huh. How much of the trip, the initial trip, did you plan out?
I honestly had everything planned out. I only threw in a couple of extra spots as I traveled. Like I had no intention of going to Jordan, but I had time and I was nearby, so I went to Jordan. But everything else was kind of planned out because I knew there were certain things I wanted to do in each country and at a certain time frame. For example, I knew I wanted to be in France for the French Open. I love tennis, so I wanted to be there for the French Open. I wanted to be in Germany for some reggae festivals. I wanted to be Cali, Colombia for a salsa festival. So everything was kind of like, yeah, it was planned out.
Okay. And this is a question for both of you. When we say plan, not just like this is where I'm going to go, but like how much of a destination was planned out? Was it just where you were going to stay? Were the events planned? Did you plan where you were going to eat? Like, how deep did you go?
Definitely not the eating part. I don't know about you, but no, not the eating part. But where I was gonna go, yes, I knew where I was gonna go in Colombia. When I went to Brazil, I added some things to that. So I always gave myself some wiggle room. Like I might meet somebody along the way and say, "Oh, you should stop there," and I'm like, "Okay, let me check it out." So I don't know how your planning went, Kirill, but there was some wiggle room in mine.
I had all the wiggle room.
Yeah.
I don't really plan. In fact, I used to fly into a country, and when the pilot says, please bring your tables and chairs to an upright position, that's when I pull out my Lonely Planet book and start looking for, so how do we get out of the airport?
Oh,
What
I love it.
nearby? So my backpacking days were pretty fluid. I was just meandering.
That's awesome.
So I asked that question because somebody watching this might be wondering, like, do I need to figure out all the Airbnbs or the different places I'm gonna stay? And both of you ladies have just proved, like, whatever works for you.
Yeah. Sometimes I like to know where I'm gonna lay my head. Keeps the stress down. So definitely while I was bouncing around Africa, I needed to know where I was going to lay my head. Europe, I mean, there's hostels everywhere, South America, there's hostels everywhere. So.
Yeah, I think it definitely depends on your personality. There are some people who can't imagine, not knowing what's going to happen for, 12 out of the 24 hours of the day. I did learn my lesson with not pre-booking when I went to Zanzibar. So it's an island, so they have limited accommodations. And I was there during some kind of festival or something, and everything was booked. And I was walking around for like almost a solid hour trying to find accommodations.
Exactly.
So after that, the only place that I pre-booked were on islands.
Okay. All right. Learned a little lesson
and
there.
For me, I was chasing summer the whole time. So I felt like it was high season no matter where I was going. So, yeah.
Yep.
Now, Pat, you mentioned hostels. Did you stay in, or are you staying in hostels exclusively?
No, I did. I did mostly hostels in South America and Europe. The only hostels I stayed in Africa was in South Africa, but the rest of Africa I was doing Airbnbs. So, hostels. And then when I needed a break and I got tired of being around, sharing rooms and everything, I would go get an Airbnb. Like I need my space. I'm tired of people. I'm tired of young people. No, I'm kidding. Sometimes you need your own space. Yeah.
I lived in a hostel for 2 months when I was in New Zealand.
Wow.
And so there were a group of other expats that were on the work holiday visa, and we all happened to land at this one hostel at the same time, and we were all searching for jobs and apartments because we planned to live there for a year. But for the first 2 months, we were in a hostel, which gets old fast.
Yes, it does. It does. It does. And I'm like, I don't love to cook, so in hostels, I never want to use the kitchen. I'm just real picky about where I cook.
And where did my food go? I put this in there. Now it's
that's a fight waiting to happen.
One of the things that comes up about hostels a lot is people feeling like that is something just for very young travelers.
No, I'm 52 and I stay in hostels. It's not I met a 70-year-old in a hostel. So no, it's not just for young people. And I met the most amazing people and I hung out with people of all ages. So
I do think that you need to research the hostel. There are some hostels that are straight partying and a little scandalous, and that's where you go to have a good time. So if you're not into that vibe, then don't stay there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I'll be 46 next month, and I have never been the oldest person in a hostel, not even close. So just wanted to put that out there. We talked about planning. Did you make any mistakes as you were doing your long-term travel?
Nothing major. I didn't know, where was I crossing? I took a shuttle from Tanzania to Nairobi, Kenya. And I didn't know that they wouldn't accept, was it, I think I had a bunch of dollar bills to pay my visa, and they wouldn't accept dollar singles. They wouldn't accept dollars. So
They
I had
wanted
to,
USD, but
I
not
think I had
singles.
50. I think I had 50. I think the cost was $50, and that's what I had, 50 singles. And the guy was like, "No," and I was like, "That's all I have." And luckily, there were other Americans there, and I traded my singles for a $50 bill with another American. So that's just something I wasn't aware of. But major mistakes? No, not really. Nothing's gonna go smoothly, but I can't think of, maybe I could have budgeted better. I'm not a budget person. So I was spending money like I still had a job. I was eating out, going to Starbucks. Yeah, I'm not a true backpacker. But no.
Kirill, any mistakes?
Oh,
I remember she said Tanzania, so the first thing that popped into my mind was I was in Dar es Salaam, and then I took a bus to Arusha to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, and then because I never look at a map / plan anything, I took a bus back to Dar es Salaam to fly to Nairobi. But Arusha is like 2 hours from Nairobi, and the bus back was like 9 hours. So I was like, oops.
I remember one major mistake I made. I overstayed in South Africa by 5 days, and it's because I didn't sit there and count every single thing, every single date on the calendar. I was just like, okay, I'm good. November, December, January, I'll leave in February, early February. I did an overland tour, and as soon as we hit the border leaving out of South Africa, they're like, "Oh, you overstayed for 5 days, so you can't come back for a year." And that caused some issues because I left some stuff behind that I needed to get. I had every intention of circling back to South Africa, but nope, they ban you for a year.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Wow. Guys, if you've got specific questions that you want to ask, please leave those in the comments. And so you were banned from South Africa for a year, but you obviously were allowed back in because you
Yes,
just
but
came from there.
their immigration is such a pain in the that they still look at me crazy. They have to check their systems. Like when I went back after the year expired, I went back. I flew British Airways, so from the U.S., from D.C. to London, London to Johannesburg. When I checked in for my flight, they couldn't get me the boarding pass for London to Johannesburg. They were like, "Well, maybe you can get it once you're in London." So I get to London, I couldn't get the boarding pass. So luckily I had an 8-hour layover. So they had to call, the British Airways people had to call somebody in Johannesburg to say, "Hey, she already did her 1 year ban. So what's the problem?" Their systems, they don't update their systems, and it's still not updated. When I left South Africa after staying there 11 months, still they're looking at me crazy like, "Did you overstay?" I was like, "Yeah, 2 years ago. Your system hasn't been updated yet."
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, they're a little behind in those regards, but love South Africa, but yeah.
I think when people think about traveling for that long a period of time, because the longest I think I've been on the road is about a month. And that wasn't necessarily a choice. That was the time off that I had. I guess now I thought expected to be doing some long-term travel, but then COVID happened. So I think people might think that would get a little bit lonely. Was that your experience? Did you get lonely?
You want to go first, Carol?
Sure. So I think that's one of the advantages of hostels, and especially in Southeast Asia, you meet people who are doing the exact same route as you, and everybody has the Lonely Planet book, so everybody's going to pretty much the same top 3 hostels, and you tend to see people over and over again. And so, for instance, in Kuala Lumpur, I picked up a friend, an Australian guy, and we went all the way up to Thailand together. So that was 10 years ago, and he and I still talk on Facebook. So no, I didn't get lonely.
Yeah, no, I never get lonely. Like, never. Even when I was confined for the lockdown in South Africa for 5 weeks, we couldn't even leave our house, and I'm in there in an apartment by myself. Never lonely. Never afraid to go out to eat I'm not afraid to do anything alone. It doesn't bother me, and I always meet people. I always meet people. Like, I'm a social butterfly. Or I can not talk to you. Like, I can take it or leave it. So, and like she said, the hostels, I always meet amazing. You meet amazing people all over the world. So I never feel like I'm alone.
Okay. We had a question. What were your most favorite destinations? Which cities would you not return to? So we'll take the first part of that question. Favorite destinations.
I get asked that all the time.
Me too.
It's hard to answer. It's so hard because they're like my favorite for different reasons.
Yeah. Well, so in total, I've been to 60 different countries. So yeah, it's a lot that I'm pulling from. But in general, I do like, and I like them for specific reasons. I like Italy for the food and architecture, Thailand also for the food and the hospitality, New Zealand because I rugby and the people are really cool. And Cuba just because I think it's a pretty unique and interesting island.
Okay, so one of the things I love to do is I love to hike. So I'm gonna go with the outdoorsy kind of places, the scenic places. I'll say Switzerland, I'll say Norway, I'll say Iceland, Patagonia, southern Chile. I absolutely love, and I'll throw South Africa in there, specifically Cape Town because I was able to hike all the time. Yeah. I have so many favorite places for different reasons. So.
Okay. Cities that you would not return to.
I don't have to go back to Rio.
Any particular reason?
It just was okay. It didn't really do anything for me, honestly. Do I want to say this?
Go for it.
Ooh.
It wasn't. Yeah, it was probably. I have a hard time when it's those big cockroaches, those flying roaches. So I noticed they have that issue there a lot.
I thought it was gonna be something juicy, man.
No, that's not what I was expecting
I
at
was waiting
all.
for the tea. Like, woo, what happened?
I guess I was. I mean, all the hype about Rio. Maybe if I'd have gone during Carnival, it would have been different. But I thought it was just okay. It wasn't a big deal to me.
It was okay, and they've got big, giant flying cockroaches.
Yeah,
okay.
and if I say this, a lot of people probably get upset, but I think we even talked about it. Accra, Ghana.
Yeah.
Okay.
Meh.
The party scene is really good, but other than that, I was just like, okay, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah. Kirill?
For me, the first place that always pops to mind is Juba, South Sudan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's just not much to do there. And I didn't even live in Juba. I lived out in a refugee camp. But yes, I would not like to return there. And the other country, I just had some bad luck traveling in Bolivia with strikes and stuff. So it turned into a disaster. I don't speak Spanish. And I was on a couple of buses, and they were just like, "Look, get off the bus. There's a strike." I was like, "Hey." So, yeah.
I never even thought to visit Sudan. Did you see all the pyramids? I know they have more.
That's Sudan, and I was in South Sudan.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, Kirill's been to some of the most unusual
I
places.
know. I was like, wow, Sudan. Very
okay.
Cool. Very cool.
Somebody wanted to know, what's your favorite beach?
7 Mile Beach in Negril, Jamaica.
I would say So I currently live on an island, Sri Lanka. It's got some pretty nice beaches, and they're pretty ice, not isolated, desolate. No one's there. Okay, but I'm sure that's probably a COVID related thing. But also El Nido in the Philippines, gorgeous.
I've heard nothing but good things about El Nido.
I picked El Nido over the PP Islands, right? Because the PP Islands also has some very nice places, but El Nido is just like, whoa. And the Philippines in general has some, Boracay has a great beach as well. And also Aruba.
Okay, I made a comment the other day on somebody's post because they were trying to decide between Aruba and Jamaica. And I said, unpopular opinion, Aruba's boring, Jamaica isn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Jamaica is an entire vibe.
Agreed.
Okay. All right. Because some folks came from me and they were like, what kind of lie are you telling? I'm like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
In your travels, doing this extended solo travel long term, was safety ever a concern? If so, what safety concerns did you have?
You can go ahead.
Okay, so I don't drink, just as a safety precaution, pretty much at all. When I'm partying or traveling, it saves money also. So the only time that I felt unsafe or rather I had an incident where I had my purse was slung across my shoulder, but the actual was on my back. And so I was walking in, I don't know the city, can't remember, but in Vietnam. And I was walking on a crowded sidewalk and my spidey senses went off and I felt like somebody was too close to me. And I turned around just to see what was happening. And I was face to face with the guy and he was just like, oh. And when I looked down at my bag, like the bag was open, the flap was open, and he was definitely trying to rifle through my bag. But in all of my years of solo backpacking, that's the only time that I've ever been like pickpocketed or anything like that.
Safety should be a concern just so you're aware of your surroundings. Like you do your research and you know there's high crime in certain areas. It's just to make you aware, but I'm never fearful of going anywhere, of being by myself. Just use common sense. I did have an incident with a group of hostel mates during that whole salsa festival in Cali, Colombia. So we went to a concert and luckily our host warned us about, we stuck out. They can tell we're a group of tourists. So someone made a distraction. They caused us distraction and a commotion while we were standing in line. And next thing you know, somebody's tugging at my purse. And I remember giving them a nice elbow and saying a few cuss words and they let go of my bag. But other than that, I've never had any major issues. No issues.
Yep.
I think I carry myself a certain way too when I'm out and about.
Yes. I don't walk. I walk with purpose.
Yeah,
right?
Don't like that. Don't F with me. Yeah, walking with a purpose. You just don't look lost. That kind of thing. So,
exactly. Yeah. And so I think, like you said, you have to have situational awareness. When I was wandering around by myself in Johannesburg, now I navigate with my phone with Google Maps. Yeah. But I don't pull my phone out in the middle of the sidewalk and look around. I step into a store, get my bearings, and then, okay, go left, go right. Yeah. So little things like that.
They will show enough snatch your phone in Johannesburg.
Exactly. Yeah.
I kind of always talk about not looking like prey. Yeah. Not the current episode that's on the podcast, but the one before was with a self-defense expert. And that's one of the things she talked about. Like, you need to be out there, not looking like you're lost, looking like this is where I'm supposed to be and I know where I'm going, self-assured, that sort of thing. Somebody wants to know, Karil, how were you treated in South Sudan?
So again, I was in South Sudan, not Sudan. So at the time I was working with Doctors Without Borders, and so we were in South Sudan working with a refugee population, and I was treated very well by the locals, both the refugee community and the community that was living where the refugee camp was. Although we did have a security incident and we had to be evacuated. There was a bit of a riot, and there were a bunch of NGOs in the area. And we had to be evacuated. We had to stay in the UN complex with armed guards and then get evacuated. But no big deal.
No big deal. Just a bit of a riot. Okay, so you both have been lots of places and spent quite a bit of time traveling. Is there a country or a city where you would like to live or retire?
I don't know that I could ever sit still completely, but I mentioned before I sat in South Africa in Cape Town for 11 months, and it was easy. If I had to stay somewhere, I can chill out in South Africa easy. Our money goes further. I do drink, and drinking is a lot cheaper out there. And I can do my favorite activity, hiking, out there with ease. And the beach, everything is easily accessible in Cape Town. So I love it. Good transportation. I can take the bus everywhere. Uber is dirt cheap. So that's the one place I can, if I had to sit still, aside from America. Yeah, Cape Town, South Africa.
So when you ask that question, for me, that means that I need to get a retirement visa, right? So that kind of also limits your options to where you can go. South Africa does have a good retirement visa. You have to have, and I was actually just looking this up today. You need the equivalent of 37,000 rands per month to prove that you have that income for a specific amount of time, and that's the equivalent of $2,500. In order to get the retirement visa. Portugal also has a very easy retirement visa. So those are the two countries that I'm looking at. And I'm hoping to retire in the next 9 years or so. So we'll see.
Is the Portugal visa the D7, or is this a different one?
I don't remember the name of it, but I think it's just only the one.
Okay. Because I'm looking for another.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to have, options. It was very nice that when I left China, I knew I didn't have to go back to the US, that I had the option to go somewhere else. Yeah. So, okay.
So the US is so expensive.
Man.
If I didn't have places to stay.
That is very true.
I'm staying in my cousin's basement, and I have all the space in the world. So, and she cooks. So I'm
I know. I saw that chocolate cake.
Girl, she cooks like my mama. I'm like, I'm gonna get even fatter here. So, but yeah. So I'm gonna chill for a little while until I figure out my next move. Yeah.
Okay. We had a question. I'm not sure if this is for one of you or both of you. My goal is to take amazing images everywhere. As a photographer, how will it not be possible to look like a tourist?
So street photography is my jam. I love to be in cities and kind of just sit on the corner and take pictures. So I don't know what the OP looks like, but pretty much everywhere you go, especially if you have a big DSLR camera, you're going to look like a tourist. It's unavoidable. Because in a lot of countries, there are very few people who walk around with a large camera just taking pictures. I mean, you see that in New York or Chicago. But across the globe, yeah, it's rare. So I do that all the time. And I used to be concerned that, somebody would try to snatch my camera, but in 2 decades of doing that, it's never happened. So knock on wood, I hope it never will. I I recognize when I need to put it away. You know, if I turn a corner and it starts to look a little seedy, maybe we should put the camera away and go back where we came from. But you'll always stand out. And sometimes I just say I'm a student. And that people are more open to, you know, letting you take their picture if they think it's for a project or something, as opposed to your photo album or your website.
Do you ask?
A lot of times I do, and I'm like self-promoting here. So these are pictures.
Because I was going to ask if that was your work back there, because Kirill is a fabulous photographer.
Oh, wow.
I shared both of you your IG links in the comments. So no, I was going to ask you about that.
This is my mom's house, right? So of course mom's going to frame your pictures.
And my pictures, I'm not into photography, and I use my cell phone. I was mostly using a Samsung Galaxy S8, and my pictures are random. I don't edit them. They're just whatever it is what it is. If I look fat that day, I'm looking fat on the picture. So it's just something I see that I think is cool, or an experience, or a person I met who I want to take a picture with. So yeah.
Is looking like a tourist something that you worry about, or you just kind of go about your way?
I do what I want. I don't care what anybody thinks.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because I go to I want to see, people are like, I go to tourist attractions. That's part of the reason why I went to visit the country, you know, and I take pictures. So I don't care if I look like a tourist or not. I stick out everywhere I go, I think. Even bouncing around Africa, they know I'm not from there. So
yeah, in a second. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about that a little bit. How do they know, or why do you stick out even in Africa? Because I think some of us assume like, well, we're all brown here, so no big deal.
I know when I see an African. I mean, just by the simple way that they dress different from us. They know right off the bat. I get stared at up and down by the women because they just know I'm just different. I'm not like, you know, I don't know what it is. I know when I see an African person.
Yeah, and depending on how rural you are, you know, I wear glasses. A lot of people don't wear glasses in the more rural areas. I have a tattoo. I mean, that's not typical.
Yeah, and they're conservative. The women are dressed. They dress conservative.
I have pants on. Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to wearing a skirt.
I want to wear some shorts. You know.
Yeah.
They know. Yeah.
Yep.
It's just interesting. You can tell, like, you can tell they're not American or whatever.
Okay.
And little kids will call you. You could be riding in a car and a kid on the side of the road will be woo, or, you know, Kwaja, whatever the local word is for foreigner. In the 0.2 seconds that they see you, they know that you're not local.
Or they used to say, Obama.
I actually got that last week. I got Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama. Something I didn't ask before when we were talking about planning. So were these long-term travel trips any different than how you would move if you were just doing a shorter term solo trip? Like, did you go see things by yourself? Did you book tours?
The only time I did a tour is I did a private tour for Egypt. And I think I would have did that whether it was a short term or during this extended travel. I can't think of any other places I did tours. No, I think that was it. Egypt.
Yeah, I typically, if I'm on a weekend trip or something like that, I typically hit the ground running and I walk around nonstop. And then at night, I just pass out. But if I'm on a long-term basis, then, you know, you can take your time and more casually explore places. You don't need to see all of this one neighborhood in one day. You know, you can go there and fan out from there and explore incrementally. And I did book a couple of tours on my backpacking. and again, because I don't do research, I had no idea what the perception of Americans was in Vietnam. So, and why look it up, right? I booked a trip from Thailand through Cambodia and Vietnam. And I think it was something like a 4-week trip or something, 3-week long, because we spent at least 2 weeks in Vietnam. So yeah, and I just did that because it was easier than me trying to figure out, because a lot of people speak English, but in some places it's a bit of a hassle to try to figure out, how to get from A to B. So.
And that was gonna go ahead,
I left
Pat.
out my biggest tour. I said I didn't do any other tours, but I did the overland tour from South Africa to Tanzania. So overland. So we visited, I think, 6 countries. So yeah, that was another big tour, which was amazing. Highly recommended.
I loved seeing your pictures and videos, but that involved camping.
Yes.
And I don't know. And no, it wasn't like
pay for accommodated if you want to spend that money. But.
Yeah. See, so I don't know. I keep thinking about like having to go to the latrine. I don't know yet.
I feel like if I can do this stuff, anybody can do it, because I used to be such a diva. Trust me. I'm out there putting up tents, out there put my headlamp on to make my way to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Oh, gosh. Yeah. No,
gosh.
You can do it. Hear the sounds of the animals.
And when you did the gorillas in Rwanda, was that part of a tour, or was that just a separate experience?
Actually, it was. I did it as a tour. So 2 nights, I think. It was just easier for me to get from Kigali to the national park. But when I got to the national park, I saw some people getting dropped off by like a taxi or something. I was like, man, they just saved a bunch of money. Yeah, so for me, yeah, I went ahead and paid for the tour, which is, it was expensive.
Okay, well,
one of my big ticket items that I did.
That kind of leads into the next question we have. What have you splurged on during your travels?
The gorilla trek in Rwanda definitely was the most expensive thing. I think it ran me about $2,300.
And specifically on my backpacking trip, I think getting a hotel room versus a hostel, and I think I went skydiving, so that's what, like $200. So I think that's probably the most expensive thing that I did.
Yeah. Okay. I did the Serengeti, but I can't remember how much that maybe that was considered a splurge, but to me it was definitely hands down the gorilla trip.
Yeah, it's worth it.
That was costly. Yeah.
Okay. What do you do to help yourself stay on budget? Can either of you really answer that question?
I'm horrible. Because I never had to be on a budget. So even going in, no, I was eating out a lot, which I shouldn't have been. But like I said, I don't like using the kitchen in the hostel. So I was eating out. I was still going to Starbucks. So no budget for me. I spent too much money. But I always had my safety net of my military retirement coming in. So I'm okay. I know I'll never be hungry, and I'll always have a roof over my head. So there's no stress for me. I don't shop anyway, so.
Correll?
And for me, I knew that I had the work holiday visa in my pocket. So although I didn't know how much money I would be earning in New Zealand, I knew that at least from month 1 to month 4, I had to use my savings. But from 4 to, and I was in New Zealand for 10 months, so 4 to 14 months, I could at least earn a bit of money legally, and try to make back some of the stuff that I had spent in the prior 4 months.
Okay. And this, something Corell said earlier made me think of this. How do you handle, well, first of all, do either of you speak a language other than English?
I speak Spanish. Spanglish.
You just say Spanglish?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So how do you navigate this? You're by yourself, you don't speak the language for
Google
the most
Translate.
part. You say Google Translate?
Google Translate and body language and sign language. I mean, we know how to point, and there's always more than one way to communicate. So I was always good. A man gave me directions in Italian one time when I was in Italy, and I was just like, okay. But he was pointing. I found where I needed to go.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, wow, okay. I just paid attention to where he was pointing.
Mm-hmm.
So, where there's a will, there's a way.
I find that, at least if you're in a big city, if let's say your phone is dead, so now we've got technology to help, right? You've got Google Maps and Translate, but at the very least, back when I was doing it, we didn't have that option. And so if you go to what looks like a little kind of a classy or upper scale hotel, then typically the concierge or somebody at the front desk will be able to answer questions and help direct you. And they maybe even have a printed map, right, that they give to their guests. So that was usually my go-to.
But thank God for Google Maps, right? I've used that in some of the most rural places, and I'm like, they still work.
Back in my day.
It was like, you mean turn down this dirt road? Okay.
This little tiny thin white line. I didn't really understand how much I use Google Maps. I go walking every morning here, and so I'm always mapping out the route on my phone. And I thought everybody did that. And my friend that I walk with is like, no. Well, I traveled for a month, January 2020, and my cell phone died while I was in China. So I was going to pick up one when I got to London. The problem was I was borrowing somebody's Chinese phone. And so when I got to the UK, the Chinese phone didn't work. I hadn't picked up my new phone yet. So I had no Google Maps. And I didn't think ahead enough to like really understand. Like I had the name of the place I was staying. But I didn't have like an address. Like I couldn't find it. So I wandered around Dublin for about 3 hours, wandering into places, and would be like, do you know where such and such place is? And then they would try and point me in it. Oh my gosh.
It's
so
amazing how much we rely on that.
Yes.
That app, it's a lifesaver.
I can't really remember how I did this before that. I really can't. All right. We have a few minutes left. So if anybody has a question that they haven't covered, go ahead and drop that in the comments. While we're waiting to see if anybody else has a question, my question is, what's left on your list of places you want to travel to?
For me, it's not, okay, Asia is the continent I was supposed to explore next, but then the pandemic happened. The only place in Asia that's on my bucket list truly is Tokyo. Everything else was just, it's going to be cool to go to those places, but I don't have to. Like, I wouldn't cry if I don't get to travel around Asia, honestly. Everything else I've always wanted to do, I've done.
And for me, so Sri Lanka is pretty centrally located to explore the Middle East and Eastern Europe. So I've never been to any of the UAE. I've not been to Istanbul or India. So I was hoping to do a bunch of little mini trips around that area from home. Maybe this year.
We'll see.
Maybe. Maybe.
Like, people are asking me what's my next. I don't know what my next move is. I don't know. I'm not stressed about it, but yeah, COVID.
Yeah. Is I know I'm gonna get the name of the thing wrong. The long walk across Spain. What was that thing called?
That's the Camino de Santiago.
Yes.
I was supposed to do that this past May, and COVID happened. So
So is that still on the list, or it's like, if I get it?
That, and I do want to go back to Tanzania to do Kilimanjaro, hopefully one day. Yeah.
I met somebody when I was in Ghana who had done Kilimanjaro, and she says everybody needs to do it.
You know, I was right there. I don't know. I just wasn't ready while I was in town. And I met people who were doing it, and I'm like, man, I should have did it while I was there. But I felt like physically I wasn't ready, and I didn't have the equipment with me. So.
Oh, they'll rent you anything you want.
I'm sure.
I bought so much extra stuff. I was like, ah.
Really?
Yeah.
So how was it?
So it's pretty level. And there are a couple of routes that you can take, but most of the time it's pretty level until you get to the ascent day, and then you're scrambling on the rocks to get up. And the porters carry all your stuff. You just have a day bag. So it's actually just kind of a leisurely hike for 3 days, and then a couple hours of scrambling. Yeah. Then you're done.
Congrats.
Yeah, thanks.
Leisurely hike for 3 days.
I can show you pictures. No
words that would never come out of my mouth. I'm not trying to diminish your achievement at all. I'm just saying those are words I'd never say.
That trek, the 4-day trek to Machu Picchu, there was one day where we were going up the whole day. So,
yeah, that's rough.
Not for me. I have one more question. Is there anything that you wish you had known before you set out on this long-term travel?
Wow.
Yes. So for me, I had a house in DC that I was still paying a mortgage on, and trying to get a tenant on. So that sucked up a lot of my money. I could have gone further had I just defaulted on my mortgage earlier than I did, because I eventually defaulted on it, right? But I paid that mortgage for like 7 months, and I could have saved thousands of dollars had I just defaulted earlier. And
for me, I can't think of anything.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you both, ladies, for coming and sharing your adventures with the group. I appreciate you both. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Nice to meet you, Karel.
Nice to meet you too, Pat.
Bye, guys.